morning, everybody, and welcome to the Monday, March 6th, 2023 meeting of the Asheville Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We'll do with a roll call vote of everybody that's here. Sorry.
Tara Irby here.
Brian
Metzman here.
Chris Day here.
Marge Bukowski here.
Andy Barnett here.
Emily Axtman here.
Paul Heathman here.
And Wayne Smith here.
And we also have joining us from city staff, Sasha and Kevin. Thank you. First item is we have approval of our minutes from last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the actual minutes from February? If so, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thanks. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Okay. Next up, we have a discussion of our bylaws. Last meeting, we discussed some ways to revise it to allow for co-chairs. I believe we have in front of us actually I didn't print that off, but we have, do we have actually, so it was drafted up, and do we have, is it written as a motion? Right, I don't have it open.
Let me pull it.
There we go. Thanks.
So I put a cover sheet on this if you go into your materials folder there and draft bylaws. I did put a cover sheet on here. Basically, I'll just give you a quick summary. So Janice Ashley from Legal and I drafted these bylaws. You have two options. We drafted it, like you can, in both cases, you have the option for co-chairs. The question is, do you want to also have a vice chair? Janice said from her experience with the Historic Resources Commission that it's helpful to have a vice chair who can step in if the two co-chairs can't make it. Now, given that it may be hard to find someone to serve that role, it's totally up to you all. We can easily, make the changes. There's just a couple small changes. So basically the bylaws here, this is kind of small. It's not letting me make them bigger.
It's basically looks like a shall or may. Is that the, let's see.
Right. We could take the may or shall, out. So that's really, the only choice here. I do have suggested motion here, and I didn't add the vice chair thing in here. I thought we could come to it, you all could discuss it super quick and come to a conclusion, whether or not you think it's a good idea to have a mandated vice chair or not. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Basically, one has the flexibility of their may, and the other one says their shall.
Right. Now, we could just do may, and then you can choose whether or not to have co-chairs with a vice chair or not. I guess I hadn't
Choose
thought of that.
flexibility.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will delete this. I can't edit it because I'm not here. I'll edit it in my own. So I can make that quick change if you all are, is there anybody who wants to comment on this or concerns?
Anybody have any other okay.
Comments?
Yeah, I think flexibility with the may is good. So basically, we're going to where's the motion card?
So those are really the only changes.
Okay. So the motion that would be that we move to amend the bylaws as suggested, and I see. So we don't have to specifically, if the language we're using is the may, we don't have to then in the motion refer back to the vice chair language, right?
No,
Okay.
because the main change you're making is about co-chairs.
sounds like the motion is I move that we amend the AHAC bylaws as suggested to allow for the election of co-chairs as a leadership option for the committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? We'll do a roll call vote, I guess, just on this one.
No, you don't have to do.
Oh, we don't have to? Okay.
We're
Okay.
not virtual.
Okay, got it. Okay. So, all in favor then?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Good, so moved. Yay. Okay, so now that's that done. That's done. Are we ready to elect co-chairs? No.
Weren't we gonna get some guidance at this meeting on conflict of interest and sort of the optics of having developer interests represented in the leadership on the committee?
You can ask for that?
And I
I
asked,
thought we asked for it
yeah,
last week.
you did, and I think our city attorney who was going to attend couldn't make it today, or she couldn't make it here in time for that discussion. But I think, I've heard her say this many times, so just for boards and commissions, the general guidance for conflict of interest is if you have a financial or potential financial interest in something. I think, the appearance of conflict of interest, it is good to be aware of that, and
You just recuse yourself.
you recuse yourself, you ask the committee to vote on that every time you have a conflict of interest.
So only from the vote. I mean, you can be part of the
No,
discussion.
no, sorry,
No.
I don't mean to be silly. No. If you have a conflict of interest, you should not be a part of the discussion, and you should actually leave the room,
Okay.
frankly. Because then your presence could put pressure on your peers to,
And
You
that's
want
where
clarification?
my question is about, someone who might often have a conflict of interest, in a decision, being in leadership, because it's difficult to, you would need to recuse yourself from agenda setting and, lots of things that don't have to happen outside of public meeting space that, could call a decision into question.
Do you want to, okay, do we want to wait and then for next meeting have legal so we don't get stuck on this? Is that what you feel more comfortable with?
I had hoped that was happening this month, so. yes.
yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's, I don't know that
I don't
legal's,
feel comfortable
yeah.
knowing how I would vote on certain candidates without,
Well, as long as the person has no financial interest whatsoever in the process, do they
Sounds-
still have to recuse themselves just because they might know the developer?
No.
Sounds like maybe we should, let's make sure.
I'm not sure they'll be able to give you the ironclad
Yeah.
reason you're looking for.
Yeah,
I think it's going to have to be based on what you
Yeah,
think.
I mean, I see your point. I mean, it's like I said in the last meeting, I have purposely not ever submitted anything to Housing Trust Fund because that way there was never any conflict with me discussing Housing Trust Fund or Luigi. And now that I do have 2 submitted Housing Trust Fund applications, I probably would not feel comfortable being in a conversation about my Housing Trust Fund applications or things that affect it. So, I mean, I can see your point. So.
Right. I mean, really, it's less, I'm sort of less concerned about an actual conflict of interest where someone has a financial, interest in something as much as I am about the ability of this committee to maintain public credibility by having the leadership,
Yeah. I mean, I think there
free
is,
from decisions.
there is a
So you're
part of,
talking- I'm sorry.
there is a part of like being at all these, I mean, I guess that is probably where the legal question is. A lot of us are very skilled at having to like put this hat on for this and put this hat on for this, but to understand where the legal hat swapping.
So you're
comes into
talking
place.
about not just being someone who would be like a civil engineer or a general contractor, or, I mean, there's so many things that,
Yeah, I mean, the
how
thing
far
that,
down the line are you gonna go?
Yeah.
Versus being a developer
right.
like he is. So.
The question that keeps coming up for me, or the example that keeps coming up for me is a couple of years ago when we, reviewed the Housing Trust Fund policy and created an option for development of home ownership in Housing Trust Fund bonding. I was a strong advocate that we open that up because I felt like that was the right policy decision, but it's also one that makes that funding source available to my organization in a way that it hadn't been before. So, while I feel like it was the right, public policy decision for the city, I think, you know, someone in the community who was looking for a reason to disparage the work of this committee could say, well, look at that, he was just, you know, buttering his own bread. So that to me is the place where, you know, I feel like we just need to, I need some guidance. Again, not so much about the actual conflict of interest, you know, from a legal sense, but what's the perception of the credibility of this committee doing its work at representing the community's interest in affordable housing?
Okay.
So another organization I served on a board, when you joined, you were required to list out what your potential conflicts of interest could be perceived by others outside. So you would say in advance, I'm a civil engineer, my firm does work with people who develop properties, both affordable and non-affordable properties, therefore, that's a potential conflict. So when you, and then in specific discussions, all you have to do is, if you identify that, remind people of that, then people can take your opinion within the context of any potential conflicts you might have. I think where you run into issues if you don't disclose it, right? So if we said, I'm gonna vote on a project, and then, keep picking on Chris, he said, but we're voting on a micro-housing project, we should endorse it, and my firm is planning to do work for them, then you should probably disclose that up front during the discussion. And then as a committee, we can say you should recuse yourself or not. I think that's the way you just have to put it all on the table. And it's the same thing for nonprofits. You know, if you're a supporter of Homeward Bound or Haywood Street Congregation and something like that comes up for a discussion, you should also disclose that, hey, I'm a big supporter of that organization because it's, while I don't work for them, I am trying to further that organization's objectives.
Yeah, and Brian, I'm sorry, I was just gonna keep beating this, but I think that makes a ton of sense for when we're in this room, and I also know that the chair or co-chairs or vice chairs are sometimes doing the work of this committee and setting the agenda of what we're gonna talk about and those kinds of things in a way that there is no opportunity for public disclosure.
Right.
So I did get a message from Janice, and I guess this is just to the meeting piece, not what you just said, Andy, but she said, you know, for appearance of conflict, you just disclose it, and if the rest of the committee feels it's a conflict, then they can vote to recuse. It's less of a concern for an advisory committee where you are not making final decisions, unless, you know, direct financial interest as I stated. So.
That's how when I've ever asked about it, that's how it's been explained, where an advisory committee is a little different. And then also our charter does call out for, like, it's gonna be a developer, it's gonna be a banker, it's gonna be, so it's gonna, because our charter is calling out for people, there's always, we're playing in the field, so yeah, we're gonna understand it. But I do, you know, from our, when we made the recommendation, we did request for legal to come so we can ask the questions rather than have to discuss this amongst ourselves. So if people are more comfortable waiting until next month and making sure we can get Janice or Brad or someone here, is that?
Still, though, the answers to those questions are going to be legal and not so much about what the optics are, which is
Yes.
what you're speaking to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I don't know, I mean, you know, to your point, like, we are on this committee because we work in the community doing this work, and our work doesn't end when we walk out of this room. And we're not such a big enough community to where, like, we can choose people who aren't gonna be involved in some of this, you know, the boots on the ground part of the work. So I think there may be times when it gets a little close, but it kind of is what it is. And, you know, you folks are really valuable to this community, and I want everyone here to be able to forward our mission, right? This is why we're here, so.
Can I ask, maybe I'll ask Andy then, so like, do you feel like for you to feel comfortable putting yourself up for a leadership role, do you feel you need the clarification from legal?
Again, it's not, I mean, I feel pretty clear about what the legal requirements are around conflict of interest. And I don't know how we get this, but I want to understand that, you know, who we select for a leadership role isn't going to affect our ability to represent the public's interest in affordable housing, which is what our main goal is, right? So, like, people are going to perceive this group as having, you the best interest of the affordable housing residents of the city of Asheville in mind, rather than something that benefits a particular development interest or affordable housing developer interest or whatever it might be.
And Sasha, I know Janice didn't speak to that, but can she speak to that? Because perceived conflict of interest can be just as harmful as conflict of interest.
Sure, and she could probably come at the end of this meeting if we want to come back to this. I don't know if we'll have time, but she has been listening to the conversation.
Okay. All right, so my feeling with you, we'll put this on a pause for now and we'll see if we got to come back to it or this goes to the next meeting, just so we can. Okay. At least we got the amendment done. Thanks. Okay, so we have a presentation on housing choice voucher. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Michelle Moore. I'm the co-director of the Housing Choice Voucher Program with the Asheville Housing Authority, and I was asked to come speak and give you a little more information. I understand you get a monthly report on our voucher counts, and there may be some questions. Do I need to address this?
Yes,
Okay.
or just speak a little louder,
Okay.
whatever you feel comfortable with.
Perfect. So I understand that the data that we provide may still leave you with some unanswered questions, and there's conversation around whether or not that actual report is the best tool to paint a picture of our vouchers and how we're meeting the need in terms of affordable housing. I've got a list of questions forwarded from you, Sasha. Should I just maybe go over those?
Sure.
Our answers? Okay.
So, yeah, I just asked Michelle a bunch of questions that have come up in discussions here, or at HCD, or council, or questions that I have, so.
And I'm assuming everyone has our most recent report.
It'll be in your data folder online if you want to look at it.
That does look like it, the one you held
This doesn't
up.
look like the most recent, I mean, I
So that,
don't,
sure.
I printed it off Friday.
So the January reporting that you should have is going to look different than the previous ones because the graphs at the bottom, those are missing. So when you, month to month, the graphs down below will start to populate. But so the January every year, that report's going to look a little blank. But in terms of the Housing Authority's total voucher count, we have 3,414 total vouchers. We have 1,525 project-based vouchers. We no longer operate, which I'm sure everyone here is aware, but we no longer operate under public housing. So our project-based vouchers are those units that were converted from public housing to what is called RAD units. But those are the project-based voucher units. And again, that count is 1,525.
And does that include like what's happening with the Homeward Bound project and some of these other ones?
Those are separate. Those are different project-based vouchers. But the 1,525 is strictly those RAD units that the Housing Authority owns and manages, like Beaverview, Pisgahview. Right. And then we have tenant-based vouchers. Now, tenant-based vouchers, those are assigned to the tenant, and those are the vouchers that folks use out in the private rental market, and they rent a unit on the private market. If they move, that voucher goes with them, because again, that's a tenant-based voucher. Now I've broken out my number, I'm sorry.
Maybe you can just go down the
Sure.
that would help.
So there's a project-based voucher listing there for Lifehouse, the one that says LH, that's Lifehouse. That's a project-based development on Peachtree out in South Asheville. They have 20 units there, and those are project-based vouchers tied to those units. Then the VASH vouchers, these are special purpose vouchers tied to the VASH, the VA supportive housing vouchers, 341. The NED vouchers, 75, those are non-elderly disabled. Mainstream, 37. Emergency housing, 47. Emergency housing vouchers are newer for us. We worked with the Continuum of Care, Emily Ball, their partnering agencies, ABCCM, Homeward Bound, Helpmate. I'm forgetting someone. Helpmate, Alida Home, that might be who I missed, Homeward Bound and ABCCM. So each of those agencies had a commitment of a different number of vouchers, and those agencies refer folks to us with those emergency housing vouchers. And the initial award was for 47 of those. And then we have 1,369 other tenant-based vouchers. Those are basically just our regular tenant-based housing choice vouchers. So not a special purpose voucher that comes through a referral.
What's the difference between mainstream and regular? Because you said one's an other, what's the difference between mainstream and?
So mainstream, we don't have an active award on those. Let me see if I brought information on that. I'm so sorry. Those are for disabled families who are entering, like more leaving dependent living and going out into the private market for independent living. And we don't have like a continuing award on those. So if you look over where it says available, and for the mainstream, for example, there are 4 available. So of that for 37, or of that initial award that we have, we've had 4 of those folks have left the program, and so we have 4 that we could lease up. So that available column corresponds, of course, to the different voucher types. I don't know if that added confusion to the process. This, it looks like it's the same. I'm not sure why the highlighting is there. That's the data that I actually update monthly, the highlighting, and I may have sent that in with the highlighting on there. But it is, this is actually December's, I'm so sorry. So the one I'm looking at, I brought November, December, and January because the question was posed if this was a useful tool for you guys, and in all honesty, in my opinion, it's not. It's a lot of numbers. Obviously, those numbers are important, but I don't feel like it really tells the story as well as it could. So we're certainly, at the Housing Authority, we're certainly open to providing the numbers in a different way or the information in a different way. The Housing Authorities work closely with Kate Pett in developing some reports for Thrive and for a recent Brock committee that, a collaborative that we're partnering on. And again, we're open to presenting the data in whatever way would be most useful.
I think the big thing that we're focused on would be the tenant-based vouchers rather
Sure.
than project-based vouchers.
Right.
And so of the tenant-based vouchers, how many are that have been issued but people can't find units? That's sort of, we're using it as that benchmark for,
Absolutely.
you know, the lack of affordable housing.
But aren't the the project-based RAD vouchers, are people trying to move out of public housing?
So there was a question about tenant mobility. So tenant mobility vouchers are tenant-based vouchers that are issued to folks in the RAD or the project-based voucher units that we own and manage. So folks who live in our developments who want the tenant-based voucher, after they've lived in housing for a year, they can apply for the tenant-based voucher. But it's called tenant mobility. So it's folks who are moving out of housing or project-based housing, our project-based housing, and out into the private rental market. Those tenant-based vouchers are called tenant mobility vouchers.
So are those not listed here for my?
They are part of the other, where it says tenant-based at the very bottom, where it says other. Yeah, they're lumped in there.
So it's not RAD, it's tenant-based,
Correct, yes, yes,
or other, rather?
yes. And we could certainly break that out if that's another smaller specific population that we want to report on that would help you guys. We're certainly,
I think what we were trying to see is out of that lump sum of the mobility tenant-based vouchers.
right.
I want to make sure the term right. How many of those are being returned? How many of those tenants are not able to actually find housing using those type of vouchers? is, I think, the biggest concern.
It's around 50%. I mean, it's not right. So there are a lot of factors involved with that, though. So for our tenant mobility folks, while they want to leave project-based housing and they want to rent on the private market, they have housing. They're in a secure unit, so they don't necessarily have the urgency that someone who's coming right off the wait list and may not have secure, stable housing. So it's hard to look at that number. I mean, it can be shocking, but it's not necessarily a representation of dire need. We see a lot of folks who've requested the tenant mobility voucher, their voucher expires and they immediately reapply. And this cycle can go on. They'll get the voucher, look, not find exactly what they're looking for, and that voucher will expire and they'll just apply again. So again, it's hard to look at that number and,
So when that voucher expires, does it go back out into the quote open market?
to the availability.
To the availability?
Correct.
And if they don't come back and say, I want this back, then it's out there for anybody?
Correct, yes.
Michelle, I used to work for HelpMate, and I did actually help to assist 8 of the clients with the EHV voucher. So I'm a little aware of that, but I don't think that most of the clients are not finding things that they want. They're not finding things that they're eligible for. So I think we need to be very clear about that most people who are living in project-based housing want to get out.
Right.
But they're not able to find housing that will accept their voucher.
True.
For one,
Yes.
most of these people can't pass background checks or credit checks. So that is the reason why.
Right. There's a myriad of issues and factors, obviously, at play that the numbers alone just can't and don't represent, but that we're certainly happy to be a part of painting that picture
Brought that
better.
up, what are the criteria for eligibility?
So with the tenant mobility or the tenant-based vouchers, that's going to be dependent on the property owner. So they may qualify for our voucher, but they're going out into the private rental market, and if it's a large apartment complex who, has a corporate office with,
Like Hawthorne?
right? Partnership property management, yes. So they're going to have corporate level policies and eligibility criteria that folks are going to have to meet. We've got the smaller mom and pop landlords, of course, but again, it just depends on those landlords or property managers with that eligibility criteria.
So so would you say of like, the vouchers that are unused, I hear you saying there's some that are the tenant mobility, so those are tenants who are currently in your units.
Right.
And there's a certain amount of those that are looking for other housing. And then so let's say I don't live
Right.
in a housing authority development, but I need a voucher. And what is the application
Sure.
process? What is income levels? What is
So we take applications. Our wait list is not closed, it's open. So someone who doesn't have a voucher and is not in assisted housing can apply. Our wait list is unfortunately longer than 5 years for someone who does not come in with a referral. There are conversations that it could be as long as 10 years, but our notifications say 5+ years when the eligibility letters go out to folks who are applying just off the street with no.
What are your criteria for eligibility? You mentioned a credit check.
So we don't credit check in terms of the voucher eligibility. It's just a screening on income. We just do a pre-application based on what's reported on the application, and then after they come up on the wait list, we verify things like income. And then if they're going into project-based housing, we would do the other screenings. But in terms of the private voucher, right.
And income is what are you looking at?
I don't have the income limits in front of me, but
Yeah.
based on the number of people in the household, we would look at the very low income limits.
You look at their tax returns?
So when they apply, it's what we call a pre-application, and because our wait list is so long, we do no verification at that time. So they're just reporting on an application. So it's a pre-eligibility essentially, and then when they come up off the wait list, we verify. And we have a hierarchy. We have a EIV, enterprise income verification system that we use, and if we can't pull income there, we move on to pay stubs and so on and so forth. But we do verify it once they come off the wait list.
And you said like if they, so it's 5 to 10 years as wait list, not for the housing, but that's just to get the.
To get the private rental market, the tenant-based voucher. Excuse
So
me.
someone, and a referral, like how does a referral come that you get someone, like, what if, like, example, what if I own a property that I'm willing to lease to someone? Can I?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. that's what I was saying.
Right,
So I
yes.
can't refer and find my own, find a
Right.
tenant.
Literally, the special purpose vouchers that we have with those MOUs in place with partner agencies, those are the only ways that folks come in with a referral. So it'd be like the VA for the VASH vouchers or the other continuum of care partners.
Sir, what was NED, what did NED stand for?
Non-elderly disabled.
Disabled, okay.
So just to say this a different way.
Sure.
A light bulb kind of, well, not really, but when we often get this report and we look at like assigned, who's looking, and we see 104 households on this month, right? Next month, it might say 85, and the following month, it might say, something else.
Right.
That's really not an indicator of the wait list. And-
Correct.
And then you all are making a decision about how many vouchers to release. Could you talk about that?
Sure, so I believe, 1499, if you look below the highlighted section, it says wait list 1499, that's on this report monthly.
Okay.
And that's how many people are on the wait list.
And that equates to 5 years.
Yes.
And that's based just upon supply in the private market?
Right, and our voucher turnover rate, how many people can we pull off the wait list at a given time? How many folks are going off the program and releasing vouchers? It's unfortunately a slow process. Like Sasha referred to, the 104 available, those are folks who have vouchers who are out there looking now. And again, that number will fluctuate month to month, depending on how many folks we were able to either pull from the wait list that month, or this number carries over. So when a voucher is issued, folks are given 90 days on their voucher initially. So that number is going to have, there's going to be an overlap with the numbers. In other words, some of those numbers were included in last month's and they still have their voucher. Others, the number will change if vouchers expired and if we issued new vouchers. And those are the types of things we could break out. We could break out how many vouchers did we issue this month, how many expired this month of that 104, for example.
So we're there.
That would probably be better.
So there, when we hear this number, so when there's this 1499 number, those are people, so they do not have vouchers.
Correct.
They're just on the waiting list to get vouchers.
Right.
And that is and so there's like two separate waiting lists. Like there's the waiting list to get the voucher, and then once you have the voucher, then it's to find housing for it. So what I'm reading from this, there's 104 that have vouchers already that are looking for housing.
Correct.
So when we talk about, so let's just say, like, and are vouchers available from those who are on the wait list? Like, let's say if I opened up an apartment building and I've got 1,000 units and I'm gonna offer them all to voucher housing, do the vouchers automatically become available for those people?
Not necessarily. So our tenant mobility folks, they do have a defined preference. So if you're living in our project-based housing and you've applied for that tenant mobility voucher, you get a preference for the private market voucher over folks who are on the wait list who have no voucher. Because there's an initiative to move folks out of high poverty areas into higher opportunity areas.
And what changes, like, is it just a funding thing that changes? Like, why aren't more people?
I think does HUD set a certain number
Sure.
that we get every year?
Yes. And the number of our vouchers really doesn't change, in all honesty, year to year. We received 8 new vouchers, and we don't even always receive new vouchers year to year. Our special purpose vouchers, we will either get continued funding and it increases for those, but those are very small amounts. And again, not helpful for the folks who are on the wait list. Again, it's those referring partnering agencies.
I just find it fascinating because.
Yes.
Because here we're spending so much time creating units that have more
Vouchers,
voucher
and it doesn't
acceptance, but we're basically saying, even if we created these units, there's only 104 people, not only, but there's 104 people looking to use them. And so if we created 200 units, the people don't have the vouchers to use them, and you don't know.
Well, if
they could get them.
In theory, if we're freeing up, if we're issuing those tenant mobility vouchers and we're freeing up the project-based units in our developments, those folks who have applied for both would be moved into those units that are being vacant. Not everybody applies for both, and not everybody's open to go into project-based voucher housing first. It's the quickest way. I mean, if it's honestly in terms of just general information, if you're an applicant or if you need housing, the quickest way to get our tenant-based voucher is to accept a unit, apply, of course, and accept a unit in our project-based voucher. Stay there a year, apply for the tenant mobility voucher, and within months, you will get your, so, a year and a half maybe compared to 5 to 10 years.
Do you think people understand that? Do you think the public?
They do, but there are just so many people who either are not open to that, or we field a ton of calls, just like the scenario you mentioned. I'm a landlord, I have a tenant, and she, her husband just passed away or lost a job. Like, it's heartbreaking, but there's just not a process there. There's no quick way to assist those individuals.
So, sorry.
That's
Go ahead.
okay.
I have a question. So are you seeing that people are finding housing in 90 days? Because I work, or 180 days, because really, but are you seeing that people are actually finding housing in 180 days?
It continues to be a struggle. I mean, the market, we have fought to increase our payment standards, which I can certainly speak to that. And just as soon as we get that approved, the market explodes again. Like when we got our most recent payment standards increased, I was so elated, but then you look at them now and it's just a constant struggle. But to answer that, it's still very tough.
Can you give me like a percentage? Let's say you give out 10. Do you actually get 6 back, or are you getting 4 back, or 1 back?
Well, we're probably getting 5 back, but again, it varies, because some of those are the tenant mobility who, again, they may not have that urgency, or they're, like you said, there's so many factors in there to why those are going.
Not enough properties.
There's not enough properties, definitely, especially the 1-bedrooms, and that's, again, another conversation.
3 and 4 bedrooms.
Yep, but they're, yeah, yeah.
So,
Yes.
Yes, folks are fighting the stigma that exists. But yeah, the amount of rents that property owners can get and command is just, it's hard to stay in line with that, with the voucher payment standards.
so I know y'all have that, and I'm just wondering if these numbers are included in here, the home ownership program through housing for people who are already in the red project base, and if they want to move into home ownership, are those numbers included in here?
The home ownership is in the other.
Okay.
And we have 76, I believe, it's in that ballpark, who are in homes that they've purchased and are receiving monthly subsidy with. And again, we can absolutely report on that monthly. But those are the tenant-based vouchers. So if someone's in project-based housing, they would have to move to the tenant-based voucher. But there's a process, and we absolutely work with folks.
Is any of this data segregated by race? And the reason why I'm asking that is because as we think about the ones that are coming back, are finding it harder to get vouchers, is any of that data?
Our data is not, but we could do that. I worked again with Kate with Thrive and our landlord-tenant partnership recently to start a report that looks at the different demographics.
Okay, that would be
Yeah.
awesome to see.
And she just showed me, and it's visually, again, it tells a better story than just looking at these numbers. So we'd be absolutely happy and open
So
to.
who is representing, who can go to HUD and say, wake up and give us more? What organization, or do we have some type of, somebody at the General Assembly that is doing that?
That I'm not sure of.
I don't know that we need more vouchers, we need more landlords willing to take the vouchers that we have.
Well, we can up the value of the voucher, right?
Yes.
That's the gap, is we need more money, like, each voucher isn't enough. Like, there's a huge
Correct,
gap,
yes.
right?
Because again, so HUD sets the payment standard for each jurisdiction based on the fair market rent. And we applied for a waiver to go 120% above the fair market rent. And so we were approved, and then we had to pitch that to the board, and we got board approval, of course. So it's all very exciting, but we're still in this place where the market keeps going up, and the voucher payment standard is still behind the market. So it's certainly worth the conversation if there's other gap funding or things that we could look at. But to Tara's point, yes, it's a constant struggle with having property owners, landlords who will work with the program, and whether it's build more housing or turn their existing housing into units that they're willing to accept the voucher payment standard.
Is the affordability, like how we define affordable? I know that has to have some kind of pressure on what the HUD is willing to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what's affordable, what we define as affordable here is really unaffordable. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But wouldn't that definition help to keep that amount low to where y'all not able to, like, it's not increasing as it should, as our prices are increasing?
But the voucher payment standards, to Michelle's point, are actually higher than, like, say, a rent for an 80% AMI household. If you had a voucher, your rent is actually higher than what that is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the vouchers are super valuable, and the payment standards that HACA has argued for are actually higher than what the city says is affordable. Does that make sense? Like,
But the market,
it's not guaranteed, to always be that way.
See, like, I'm really speaking to the actual market here.
Okay, yeah.
So how it's been defined as affordable
Yes.
is really unaffordable given what we're, like, our market here. That's like the reality. And so the definition don't match what's really affordable
Right.
here, which still hinders that fluctuation to be able to be, the vouchers to be valuable to a homeowner who wants to rent their property to someone who has a voucher.
because they can get much more.
Way
with
more,
market
yeah.
rent.
Well, and fair market rent's decided on, once a year, right?
Yes.
So by the time it's decided on, it's a year old, right?
Yeah.
So like, and our rapidly appreciating real estate here and rents increasing, a year is a whole lot of time for
Yeah.
a whole lot of increase. So that's what, I guess if we were advocating at something at
Yes.
the state level, that would be what we'd be asking for.
Right. Like our three-bedroom payment standard, for example, is 2338, but that's total housing. That's rent and utilities. I mean, you'd be lucky to find a three-bedroom for, under $3, and that's likely no utilities. 25 if you're,
So I think this is why the.
And again, that would be over because it's not utilities included. So it's already over our payment standard.
Michelle, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think this is why the discussions that you hear here or HCD or council about our projects, are we mandating they accept vouchers? Are we asking them to set aside units for vouchers? That's partly why this is so important, right? So we're taking these projects through and saying, certain number you have to accept them, but that's not the same as you must, right? So that's partly where this debate comes through, because we're seeing all these projects, and if you added up all those units, and even if they didn't mandate for all of the units, but even a portion
A
of them,
percentage, right? And
we
that,
could knock this,
Yes.
things are under
And-
construction, but we could knock this 104 out pretty quick.
And you
then
sent
we'd have
that
more units
question.
than vouchers.
and my answer was yes, 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 more require make that requirement, because the more tax credit units we can build or create, the more tenant-based vouchers, the more of those folks we can house.
So they can say they accept them, but when it comes down to it, they're not choosing the voucher
Correct.
holder.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
But you can also set your standards. I mean, the standards, the application process is a whole other,
Right,
like, are you
yes,
gonna accept
yes.
somebody's, yeah.
Well, that's why I think we have to change the way the language is so that
Absolutely.
it can't just be, I accept them, but that will give preference to, so that we get these people into housing. Because especially as rents rise, or as incomes rise in the area, what's deemed as affordable can go up higher than what the voucher rate is. And so they can be renting out affordable units, 100%.
But not
of them,
voucher holders.
But no voucher holders.
Exactly.
The voucher holder's coming in with $100 less a month in rent.
Right.
So, I accept that if you've got more money, but you don't, so I'm gonna take somebody else.
Right.
And so we,
Well, actually, isn't
No.
the voucher payment
Vouchers
more
are
though?
more.
Actually, vouchers is more, so really
Right
it's
now.
more of like a land, like
But
setting
not
aside.
really, because it also includes utilities, and that's
Yes.
where, like, you gotta calculate the rent
And
and
utilities.
utilities into that amount, and so if the rent is exactly what the voucher is, then it still puts a person with a voucher out because they over the limit because they still have to cover utilities.
And I don't want to get us too
Oh,
deep
sorry.
into the weeds without
Yeah.
the information in front of us, but we also thought to increase our utility allowances because utilities have increased, but that's a double-edged sword. So we got the utility allowances increased, so that's an average that we calculate to anticipate project their utility fees, their utility expenses, so that we add to that rent to see if they're at or below the payment standards. So we got that increased. That helps the tenant in terms of their tenant rent portion, but getting in the door with the landlord, it comes off the rent amount, if that makes sense.
So I have,
The payment standard, in other words, if you're 2338 and the utility allowance used to be $200, but now we've increased it to $250, it helps the tenant out once they're in the unit because it's like a deduction. So it helps them with that expense to have us anticipating a higher utility expense, and that is the reality. But in terms of getting the unit, finding the unit and getting the rent, it's, yes.
I have a question. I noticed when I was working with my clients, because they would get frustrated, especially like getting towards the 180 days, that they would just want to do portability. Are you seeing that most of the clients or residents are trying to port their,
We don't have a lot of portability, and portability is just the HUD option to port or transfer a voucher to another jurisdiction. And we speak to that during voucher orientation, voucher issuance, but we don't see it a ton. It's definitely an option.
so I was gonna ask you, do you benchmark against places like Winston-Salem, Raleigh-Durham, Charlotte? Do you all do any type of, maybe Kate does, but looking at how their system works, what their numbers are compared to, because Asheville is an anomaly when it comes to rent.
Right.
I mean, you can go to, very different. You go to Winston-Salem and they don't have any of these issues.
Right, yes.
They have some, but not.
We try to stay in touch with surrounding counties, just in case folks are wanting to stay in the area, but utilize portability nearby, but I personally have not.
I mean, they would come out ahead if they went
Right.
to Winston-Salem
Yes.
or Greensboro or one of those places.
Correct, yes.
What's
But
the-
we want to change the narrative
What's the
here instead of sending people away.
One of the things we talk about so much is unit mix and what is the demand. So like of the 90, let's say of the 91, of the 104 that are, people have vouchers that need housing or in project-based housing that are looking. What is the one bedroom mix? What is the family unit mix? Just so we know, because we're trying to design policy to meet the needs, and we hear a lot about one bedroom, but we don't always know the.
Sure.
Not the families.
Yeah.
And we actually voted on one without the data, but go ahead, Michelle. Just saying.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay.
So I did have our admissions coordinator, she's actually our staff person, Gary, who issues our vouchers. I asked her to pull some data that might help. This was from January of 2022 through January of 2023. We had, in terms of expired, was that your question, or was it leased up?
What's being requested?
Available, so there's 104 vouchers that are available.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I don't have that in front of me. But,
But go ahead and say that, because that's helpful.
and-
Who can't find.
right, the folks who had vouchers that expired, there were 21 one-bedroom, 16 two-bedrooms, 10 three-bedrooms, and 4 four-bedrooms.
Okay.
Now, she does have a column here, searching, and that would be similar to the 104 number on the current report, and her searching number is 89, so I can go over that. It would, there's just a shortage there. But for that year screenshot, there were 31 one-bedroom voucher holders searching, 32 bedrooms, 23 bedrooms, 6 four-bedrooms, and 2 fives.
So really, the 1 and 2 bedrooms are pretty equal from those statistics.
Yeah, interestingly though, a 4-bedroom is 1 voucher, but it's 4 people. So 4 times 6 being 24, that's pretty close to the 30 single bedrooms. So you're housing more people. Actual human beings
It could be.
are the numbers are
It could be
closer.
8 people. I mean, it just
Right.
depends on the household.
So you might actually be talking about a closer number in terms of how many human beings are being housed
Yeah.
versus just looking at the voucher, what type of units available.
How,
Did you find the waiting list numbers? I had it written down, and now I thought I had it written down, I couldn't find it, but in terms of the number of one-bedroom units on the waiting list, people were waiting.
No, is that something Noel provided?
I thought so. That's okay, we can look at it.
Okay.
We can pull that and bring that in, but it has always been the case that on our waiting list, that one-bedroom units have far outnumbered
Sure.
2, 3, and 4 that people are waiting for. So people who are waiting for one-bedroom units end up waiting a long, long time as it relates to availability. And so it has always been the case with our PBV and our TBV.
So what would happen if, so let's just say someone opened up a building next week and it had 50 units that they're willing to put for one-bedroom vouchers. And the list is, you said there's 20, what happens? Like what happens if there's 30? So basically you're saying there's about 20-something that are unused vouchers for one-bedrooms, and then the rest are on a waiting list that we don't know when they would get their vouchers. So what happens? Like,
If we exhaust we would continue to pull from the wait list. So if we exhaust our 104 currently, or if we're looking specifically at bedroom size, if we exhaust those numbers, then we would need to pull from our wait list and issue those vouchers.
But they're not necessarily in order of bedroom, it's like your
Correct.
order of
Yes.
your waiting.
Yes, and we would internally have to manage that.
but if suddenly there was more demand for one, like if suddenly an inventory of one-bedrooms came up.
Right.
And it exceeds what there already are, there are vouchers for one-bedroom that are unused, that there's people on the waiting list. So that would accelerate that waiting list to then be issued vouchers. So vouchers can be, that's kind of where I'm confused in the wait. So vouchers, if someone's on a waiting list, if then those other vouchers get used, then it opens up more to be issued. Is that, okay.
I got a question.
Okay.
When I think about one-bedrooms, and I guess it's just kind of how my experience was when I was in housing. The one-bedroom, so like, say I'm a single parent and I'm applying for a one-bedroom, and I have a daughter. And so would I be qualified for a 2-bedroom or a one bedroom. And so I just asked that because like, my family grew when I was in public housing. And so it was like, once I had my daughter, me and her was sleeping in the same room.
Right.
My boys were sleeping in the same room, and it met the criteria.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I went and, I didn't need another bedroom because I'm a female, my daughter, so me and my boys had their room. And so it's like,
In that scenario, we would issue a 2-bedroom voucher. I mean, they could certainly choose a 1-bedroom if they had difficulty finding a 2. The issue there is that if they find a unit that's smaller than the voucher, it also reduces the payment standard down to that voucher, down to that unit size. So, right, there's that, yeah.
They could choose a 1, but be eligible for a 2.
okay.
And then we also got to talk about being on the waiting list, because you could apply to be on a waiting list and may not get your mail or phone call or whatever, get taken off the waiting list. And you know you're not on the waiting list anymore, even though you think that you're on the waiting list. And you call and say, hey, where am I on the waiting list? Oh, you're not on the waiting list. Oh, I didn't know.
Right,
Let me
this
reapply
happens.
again, and then you go back to the bottom of the waiting list. So it's like this
Vicious
you know,
cycle.
It's not no thing that you stay on the waiting list.
Right, yes.
That's why it's very important that applicants update their information, make sure we have good contact information
A lot
to
of
be
people-
able to inform when they have access.
Yeah, a lot
Our
of-
notifications are still by mail, so when folks come up off the waiting list, we'll send a notice by mail if they've moved, and certainly over even a year period, let alone 5+ years, if folks have moved, then they're not going to get that
a lot
notice.
of people are homeless.
So
Right.
that's what I was about to say, how does that work for the unhoused?
19 N Street, making sure that you're registered there so that your mail can go.
Another agency, a trusted family, I mean, somewhere where they can definitely get their mail, and that they're checking.
And that,
So many issues.
and that number is 1,500 of the people who are waiting,
Right, yes,
who need to have a permanent address to get
Right.
the mail
yes, yes.
in Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
That's a-
Unheard of, right?
So, from a housing standpoint, are you all talking to Duke Energy? Is there any opportunity? Duke Energy is getting ready to go up 18, I mean, they're asking for an 18% increase, which would be terrible for this situation.
Right. That's why we do request, when we see it, we do annual surveys on the utility rates. And so when we see that, we request an increase to our utility allowances. So again, it helps the tenant when they are in the unit with their voucher.
I think everybody's going to need help with this.
Oh, absolutely, right, yes, yeah.
And Duke is intimately involved with our redevelopment, and they understand, you know, what our utility rates are. And so, yeah, in terms of talking to them, they are well informed.
Michelle, oh, go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was just going to say, we've talked a lot about some of the barriers, and they're certainly real, but I just keep looking at this. You know, there's about 3,000 folks who have affordable housing, very low income folks who have affordable housing through this program. That's is by far and away the largest number of low income housed folks are housed through this system. Of anything, you know, in a minute we're going to spend, you know, an hour or more talking about a policy, you know, with Luigi that'll get us, you know, a few dozen units here and there and here and there.
Right.
Like, this is where the volume and scale happens in affordable housing in our community, and it's just important for us to point that out because we spend a lot of time talking about policies that work around the margins that create, you know, incremental additional units, but you know, and the fact that, you know, I've been on this committee for 5 years, 4 years, I don't know, a long time, and this is the first presentation we've really gotten at this level of depth around the single biggest affordable housing program in our community. Like, this is really important stuff, and the things that we can do to make this program work better, affect more families than anything else we'll talk about.
That's excellent. I think just kind of bridging that gap, seeing that, thank you. You know, seeing that and seeing the work, or not the work, but what we're doing, and if we could just get the housing for folks with the voucher that we are administering, just figuring that piece out
And I
would be
think to
critical.
Yolanda's point, affordable according to who?
Yes.
Is what we need to consider.
But that's what, I mean, so what I understand, because the funding amount would change, like, so let's just say if like 1,000 more units opened up, that meant 1,000 more vouchers could get issued. So the funding exists for that, because then it's not, so the funding exists if the ones that are waitlisted, if the ones that are currently available get filled, then that means the wait list become active vouchers that funding is needed for. So the funding is there for that.
Is that true?
That's
No.
that's the big part I'm trying to understand, like if like all of a
I
sudden.
mean, HUD only
Yeah.
provides us, it's like an allotment.
Yeah.
HUD says, Asheville, you get this
Yeah.
many this year.
Yeah.
They don't say, oh, you need 1,000, we'll give you 1,000. That's
Yeah.
Right,
no, no.
right.
Project, I mean, from what I'm understanding, the mobility voucher, you know, we don't lose a unit of project-based vouchers when somebody uses a mobility voucher to move out. So those units
Those units are still there.
that
Um,
1,500.
So if someone's in Beaverview, for example, and their tenant mobility voucher becomes available and they find a unit on the private market and they vacate their Beaverview unit, we've got folks on the wait list, primed and ready that we will move
So
into.
adding supply
Absolutely,
opens up.
exactly,
units and
yes,
project-based.
yes.
How's your wait?
So you're not just assisting one person, you're assisting two. You're
Right.
moving someone off the wait list.
So how's your waiting list for project-based housing?
I would need to, so Noelle Tackett co-directs the voucher program with me, and her expertise is on the actually wait list management and on the project-based voucher side.
I just meant to get into a development. Yeah.
Right,
Okay,
yes,
that's right,
yes,
okay.
sorry, yes,
So
correct.
the more tax credit-based complexes that we can do, the better, the easier it's going to be to get these people
Yes.
in and then out to.
Correct.
So, and that's also where you can build the highest numbers.
Yes, yes,
Yes, please.
yes.
Yes.
But we would need, I think that, and I'm going to look at Kate here, but I think, or Tara and Michelle, I think we would need more federal funding to come through HUD to get a bigger net increase. Like, so if we got 8 one year, you know, if we're talking about like more than
Yeah.
just a few, we
That's a
would need
big
a
piece I'm
federal
trying to-
increase.
So that's
yeah,
what I was
that's
trying to say.
understand, yeah.
Do we have a lobbying group? Kate, are you the lobbying group? Who, or is it David? Is David the lobbying group to the generalists or to the HUD that says we must have 25 or 50 or 150?
No. I don't think that there is a lobbying group, David being one
Voice.
ED in all the EDs we have in North Carolina. So it wouldn't be him, it wouldn't be, it could be them, generally, but yeah, they take a look at the budget just like anywhere else and make a determination.
If you call her up, she can come.
Oh, yes, Kate,
It's
would you
not-
come up and speak to that issue,
Yeah.
please? Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks for spending so much time talking about this. And, you know, Tara and Michelle obviously are the experts, beyond all experts on this. But I think from a layperson standpoint, it's almost easier to see some of these big questions. And what I've learned from Michelle and through Michelle, maybe from Tara, is that we can't advocate for more until we show that we constantly really exhaust all the ones that we have. And so when I've looked at other communities that have successfully raised their numbers, they have to continually push this number. What's challenging is that our local housing authority only releases them. They can't overextend, right? So they have been given a certain allotment and they can't overextend that number, even though we need many, many more. So they're only kind of coming close to that number so that they don't overextend, which makes it hard to make the argument that we need many more. Does that make sense? So right now, if we have 100 vouchers open, they're watching these numbers very closely because they have a budget that is based on that allocation. They can't over-award that. And so somehow we do need a lobby group, and at the same time, we do have to help them place all of these folks. Barry asked a question earlier, if we had 100 new units, what would that do to it? If we had 100 new one-bedroom units, and I think what Michelle was saying, Michelle, come back over here, was that they could pull down for that specific size into the list. But I don't know, Michelle.
So in terms of that specific question, and you hit on this briefly, Sasha, we can't pull from our wait list just the one bedrooms. So that's another way our hands are kind of tied. So we pull from the wait list based solely on date and time of application. But if we saw that we had a need for 100 one-bedroom units, we would have to look at our wait list until we found, but we would have to pull all the other people that would pick up those 100 one-bedroom families. And then that's not even necessarily to say that those 101 bedrooms that we capture want or accept the unit. I mean, we can't, we can't select the unit on the tenant-based voucher issuance, but we would have to, unless internally we, revamped our preferences and all of those policies that go to the board. But that's how right now it stands. We would have to look at how far back would we have to go and how many people would we have to pull. If we had to pull, 300 or 400, then we may not have staff capacity to pull that many, certainly not in a month. There are just so many, variables.
Part of I always like real world examples, and that's why, part of why we're having this conversation is there's a Luigi application that's on the table.
Right.
That basically would provide, they're going to provide, they're being asked to provide 46 studio voucher units. So, the question that we're as a committee looking at, we're trying to look at the policy, but it's also a very specific example, like, okay, so all of a sudden they're saying we will accept 46. Are there actually, but we're saying there's actually only 30 something vouchers, and some of them are gonna, even though they've got one bedroom, they might not want a studio because
Right.
vouchers don't necessarily, so we're trying to figure out how to reconcile
yes.
real world versus vouchers, but then even the numbers that if we're saying, hey, we'll entertain this if you increase the amount of vouchers you offer, but then they're offering basically more than there's currently vouchers open for in that one class.
And I think that's just one way for me that this particular tool, this particular report is not that useful in terms of the community work that needs to be done. And I know Kate hears this from me all the time that, we're certainly at capacity in terms of the work and what additionally can we be doing. But in my opinion, it really would take breaking this information out so that we can help the community tell a better story and then make the changes where they need to be made. But I did want to mention that Kate brought up a valid point about the percentage. So on the report, at the bottom where it says total, there is a percentage there where it says 97.7% occupancy rate. So again, like Kate said, we want to get as close to 100% leased up on our vouchers as we can, but we don't want to be over-leased. Again, HUD gives us a certain amount of funding. So there's just this constant balancing act and get as close as you can. But you can also see if you look at the other specific vouchers, like we are 103.9% leased up on our tenant-based vouchers. But anyway, that fluctuates month to month, so it's not like we're in a danger zone or anything. But again, it does speak to that kind of touch and go, hitting that mark as close as we can.
When y'all define, so when we say studio, for instance, and I think one bedroom, there are two different things to me. And so how do y'all define it? So would a studio qualify for a one bedroom voucher?
So it would be someone with a one-bedroom voucher, but our payment standard's going to be lower for the studio unit.
Okay.
So our one-bedroom payment standard, for example, is $1,557. So someone with that one-bedroom voucher can go out and find a one-bedroom unit where the rent and utilities don't go over that amount. But it drops down to $1,397 for a studio or efficiency. So that same one-bedroom voucher amount reduces because the unit size. Yeah.
That's what I was. I was
Yes,
like,
yes, yes. So it might still be acceptable in terms of size, you know, for the individual or, you know, if it was a family, you know, one person and a child, for example. They may accept that, but it does, the impact is that our payment standard is reduced.
Okay.
What qualifies as project-based? So, Andy and I, we were talking about this last week. Who owns the housing authority? Like, it's not owned by the city, right?
No, it is not.
So who owns the housing authority? Who owns the?
We are a nonprofit that receives federal funds.
Okay. So it's a separate nonprofit that receives federal funding, and that's what, and so let's say, and like other markets have like they have different CDCs and other kind of things. So what qualifies creating a new project, like a development that's considered project-based? Like what if we wanted to do one? Is that, how do you then become to where it's?
You have to have the building, and then you have to apply to the housing authority for the vouchers for the units. So the Short Michigan project that we did with Homeward Bound, we bought an apartment complex, modified the units, and then applied for project-based vouchers through the housing authority.
And we do commit a certain number of project-based vouchers to developments like that. I mean, the Ramada Inn project,
Yes, the
a small
Ramada Inn project is
handful of developments that are, you know, in process now.
Chamber of
319 Biltmore is on that list.
Yes,
They're
yes.
working with the housing authority.
Yes.
Okay, because it sounds like there's benefits for everybody to designate units up front as project-based, because there's more mobility options once they've been in a project-based. So, and it sounds like it can be even a percentage. It doesn't, like if example, let's say 319, if only, let's just use example 20 units or vouchers, it can apply, instead of it just applying for other funding and saying that we'll receive, like, they'll accept housing choice, they can apply to be to accept project-based?
Yes, they could commit either project and include in their application funding, all of that, to have project-based units, a certain number of project-based units, or they could commit to reserve in a certain number of percentage for tenant-based vouchers. And that really is just a conversation and a decision on the developer.
Yeah. It's just from what I'm like overall hearing is here we're discussing wage policy, like the more we can encourage more things to have project-based components, that there's benefit. It's just kind of, as I'm just kind of hearing of like, especially the mobility options, there's almost a preference given to project-based. Like, what is it?
And from my understanding, that I don't know enough on the development end, but I think on the lender side, you know, it's going to look differently if there's a project-based voucher commitment versus tenant-based voucher. But
I've been told
we're all about either one or both.
I've been told that lenders actually prefer it because it's a guaranteed income stream.
It's guaranteed, and you don't have a vacancy rate.
Right.
That's the bigger thing.
Right, yeah.
Because
But
with project-based vouchers, if a tenant leaves, we have 60 days to refill the unit or 45 days, so it's much different. You don't lose rent during the gap.
But I think the one issue that might be there is just a budget limitation for the housing authority. There's only so many of those.
Yes, there's only so many PBVs or project-based vouchers that we can commit to other projects.
It's not an endless.
It's not like an endless supply of
Yeah,
project-based
What is
vouchers.
that number on that? I mean, typically.
I don't have it right in front of me, and I just went over it with David, that's why I knew that the 319 Biltmore, right, is on that short list. It's not 500, but
Rather
it's,
than asking new developments to reserve a certain number of units for housing choice vouchers, it may make more sense to encourage folks to do project-based vouchers for a certain number of units.
We were both at a meeting. There was a meeting last week about a group out of New York City that's basically consolidating community development corporations and then making it easier for there to be basically more smaller housing authorities. That's kind of because here, and we were talking about one of the issues we have in our community here is basically it's the housing authority, and then kind of Mountain Housing does some, but they're not really a CDC. I think it was Eagle Market is the only other one. So it kind of like the effect of, that was just an interesting,
Sure.
the difference of looking at other markets, and here basically all of the developments are operated by the housing authority. And Andy, we're talking like, who owns the housing authority? It was weird, like, we didn't even know exactly.
And it's run by board of directors,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
So they don't have to, I mean, the city doesn't really tell them what to do.
Right.
The city is the appointing official of the board of directors. but
Oh, so they
it's
appoint who's on the board
the
of
mayor.
directors?
Yeah.
Yes.
So my concern is always, even with the current properties that we have in Asheville, but even with the ones that's being built, who is making sure that these places, or, they say that they have 20 units, that there is actually 20 of those 20 units are actually people who are using these vouchers or considered, maybe low income or whatever. Because what I'm seeing by working in communities is that a lot of these properties say that they have 20 units or 10 units or whatever, but I'm not seeing our people in those units. So I just wanted to know who is the watchdog, who is making sure that these projects are actually keeping their word once they get the money, get developed, and put these out. But also too is if we do vary, if you said 100 units, 1 bedroom units, or 2 bedroom units, I could fill them. Me and Kate and Francina, we got this. Even Tawana, we will fill those units, no problem. We would have a big fair and say Section 8 approved, and I bet you we won't have no problem filling those units. It's just that we don't have enough space, or people who are taking these vouchers, and that's the problem. How I've met Barry is because I've loved up on him a little bit, and Kate too. Like, hey Kate, how are you? I got some clients that need some help. That's how I've been able to find landlords, not by going around applying.
Right.
And even you, Michelle,
Right.
you got plenty of emails from me over the years.
Yeah.
So it's just like always advocating for the clients, but we need to have some watchdogs and figure out, are these units actually being used by people who need these units?
To that point, how easy is it for the housing authority to give a list by landlord and how many tenants they have?
Not easy.
Not easy, okay,
We could generate that information, for these types of conversations. Absolutely. I mean, I typically will look up a given property owner, and I can take a look at whether it's their ledger or what have you to determine how many folks they have with us at a given time. But it might take some customization to get a report that has like every landlord and then a number of the voucher holders that they've got leased.
Because that's always been one of my concerns is what you were just getting to is we keep doing things,
Sure.
whether it's housing trust fund or, land use incentive grants to try to create units, well, how many of them actually end up
Yes.
with the people who need them the most? And it's not clear to me, we seem to have created a number of affordable units, but we haven't made much headway on this
Sure,
list, it seems like.
right.
I think.
And certainly a shorter list, like if I had a short list, I could spend time looking up, 5 properties or even 10 and finding out how many voucher holders are leased today, for example. But an extensive reporting on all of our landlords. We might have to do something with our developer, our software developer, to create that
Sorry, we need to
report.
move on. But I think what we should do is, because this whole report started from when Brandy, Brandy was on your
Yes,
we said
yes.
we wanted to have this data, and we asked for it. And we kind of asked for her, we kind of tweaked with her kind of what the needs are. But I think what we probably need to do is have an agenda item because this is so valuable, so helpful.
Yes.
And that, I think maybe what we need to do is a future agenda, just have a kind of us all put together questions of like, these are the things we don't like to see on the reports, and that way,
And then we'll make it
kind
happen.
of work towards
Yes.
making it happen, so we have the guiding data, because we ask these same questions a lot.
Yes.
But it really helps to, understand the broad view, but understand the details, because we
Right.
see these numbers, And to understand what the difference between the 104 and the 1499, that's a huge difference.
Right, yes.
And also the understanding that just if those 1,500 units came up tomorrow, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to provide the vouchers for them because you're only getting 8 to 10.
We're not funded, right, correctly, right now for that.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm clear about one thing you said. And you said like the waiting list is based off of when people apply, when people put their name on the waiting list. So just hypothetical, because I'm trying to process it, not in Barry's example of if we had 100 units of 1 bedrooms, would that take 100? If you had just take his example for instance, if you have 100 units and we have them available, but it's say 100 people would need 2 bedrooms in front of the people with the one, you would have to take those two, the ones that the 2 bedrooms, and
Yes.
the ones to even get to that. So like being specific to that
Correct.
around unit mix might not be as helpful if to say we just need 1
Right.
bedrooms or we just need studios.
Correct, because our applicants to our project-based voucher units, we look at bedroom size for those because we know, we own and manage our project-based voucher units and we know what our vacancy rates are by bedroom size. But in terms of our tenant-based voucher applicants, we're not pulling a report on those and we're not prioritizing by bedroom size. So if there were 100 one-bedroom units and we pulled 100 people off the wait list, we would not capture 101 folks who would be issued a 1-bedroom voucher. We would need to pull more, and internally we would just have to look at that, like how many would we need to pull to get all 100 of those? Yeah.
Ooh, goodness.
Yes. Yeah.
Does the city have a list of Luigi or Housing Trust Fund or even just CZ units that should be out there? And whether they're, I mean, how hard is it for us to get that list and then share it with
Yes,
Michelle?
right.
So that she can kind of
So that I
cross-reference?
could check and let you know how many, yes, yes. Are they really, that's good, yes.
That would just make my day.
Yeah.
You have to come up to the microphone.
Come on up. Come on down. Michelle recently created a report for us. It was based on December's data, so it's not on this 104, but of the 75 households at that time that had vouchers and were looking, about less than half of them were the just single occupants. So to Paul's point, not only when you look at the data that she just provided today, not only is a 1-bedroom less than half of the total units needed, but it's far less than half of the people. So I just think that's why some of those of us in the nonprofit sector keep kind of beating this drum, that while there might be a longer wait to get a 1-bedroom, it is fewer people who are waiting than the total number of people who are waiting for 2 bedrooms and above.
That's what I was saying.
And so just want to keep reiterating and underscoring what Dewana just said, which is that we have to go for a mix and that really more people are housed with larger units.
And no efficiencies. Who wants to live in efficiencies?
Well, and not to go back and forth, but I think too, part of the community conversation should be trying to eventually look ahead and, so in terms of folks like aging in place and folks who are here who are 1-bedrooms, there may not be an indicative need for, 1-bedrooms over, larger families or as big of a need, but I think getting ahead of that as folks are staying and aging in place, obviously we have to prioritize right now, but eventually getting to a place where we're looking at trends with our population and getting ahead of all the problems with housing. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
And that's why
Eventually.
affordable senior living, we don't talk about it much, but
Right.
affordable senior living is very, very important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you
And
so
I
much.
think we can all say that there's a need for affordable housing, whether you're
Right.
1-bedroom unit, 2, 3.
Yeah.
There's definitely a need, but as we see it, and the people that we serve and will continue to serve, and as they age in place, things of that nature, that's what we see as our need.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys, and I'm going to duck out, and hope Tara can bring me any information about updating our reporting for you, and happy to come back if ever needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle?
My head's full.
To Margie's question earlier about advocacy, fully funding the Housing Choice Voucher Program is one of the main advocacy planks for the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So if you're looking for somebody to get on board with to try to boost the funding of this, they're the folks nationally who are doing that work.
Okay. I guess next up we'll be discussing this Luigi and the micro units. We also have, Janice is now circled back. Do we want to, well, since she's here, let's ask her what, like, kind of some guidelines on, I guess.
Can we set a time limit if we do? Because we're,
Or do we want to talk about
I'll stay with you.
Okay. Let's talk about, maybe let's talk about this. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I want to introduce it because in light of this conversation, like of what we just had, this conversation we just had, and then in light of so council had retreat last week. There was some discussion of an idea in council to discuss the possibility of putting a pause on Luigi and looking at designing like a benefits table. So I just want to share that with as the lens of what we're looking through this, how much time we want to spend on this, because I also think this, because the voucher thing is so much to absorb right now.
Right.
And we're basically, what we have as an agenda item to discuss a policy about smaller size units for Luigi, when we just were given a whole bunch of data on unit mix that we didn't fully understand, and knowing that there might be some movement on council. So I just want to kind of get everyone to read how much we want to talk about that, and then the other parts of the agenda is here. I would like to ask, in this light of this, not conflict of interest, but when we discuss, I just have to share, when we're discussing a policy change, it's a policy change, but it's a policy change we're discussing that was brought up from a specific application. I know it's a policy change we're discussing, but it makes me feel a little uncomfortable. It's almost like spot zoning, like we're discussing something related to an application on the table that's pending. So I feel, how does the city look at that legally? Like how to discuss policy, to change policy for a pending application, that affects a pending application?
Well, Janice, feel free to come forward. I will say though, come forward and I will just talk while you walk up. The thing is think about it as if this or other developers may want to do future projects. So I'm not attached to this one project. Think about there's going to be another application. That's what I would say. So it's
Yeah,
not
and
just
that's how you were framing it. You know there's an application, but you're trying to think of it more as a broad policy. And you make it akin to spot zoning. This is policy, it is general. And so it would never be that level, because of a zoning decision, which is a final decision or a recommendation that's going to go to council. If, for anybody who doesn't know, spot zoning is sort of picking deciding this one property is going to be a different zoning than all the other zoning around it. And it's like, why did you agree to that? It seems suspicious. So I think this is a general policy discussion that I wouldn't be worried about a conflict of interest on.
And he can build it no matter what, so, right? So it is a use by right. He's already gone to P&Z.
Yeah.
He's got his entitlement, so it's
It
not.
ties in with the same conversation of there's this, what is, like we're talking about conflict of interest, or what is perceived, because I look at it, well, HCD had an application on the table. HCD said, hey, we want to hear from AHAC what they think about the policy for this so we can decide on our application. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. I mean, I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean, especially since we're looking at this out, I mean, so we're doing a review of the Luigi policy in general, but this piece of it, we're being asked to make a decision on, or make a recommendation on, outside of the timeline for that larger review. It does
Yeah.
look like, you know, we're trying to give guidance on one specific component of the Luigi policy before we give guidance on the total Luigi
The total.
policy, in order for HCD to make a ruling on a specific
Yes,
project.
that's true. And I think that when Luigi, if it continues to exist, when it gets if it gets overhauled or relooked at, this could also still be included if people aren't happy. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily a permanent forever change.
I think it touches on what Andy was speaking about earlier, though, the perceived preference. You know what I'm saying, preferential treatment,
Well,
the perception of that, because if it's an application now, we're one piece of the total project that we already have a timeline for, it is that perception, and it can be perceived that way. Even though we know we're looking at this in a holistic way, public perception is go look at this like, oh, so this application came to them, now they wanted to make it so when if my application come, it's go, you see what I'm saying? Like, it is the perception. It sets a precedent for other people to be like, well, y'all reviewed that, y'all went in and looked at that one specific part of it for this application, so now y'all can do it for my application too. And what makes the applicants different? And that's gonna be the defining.
I think you were
thing.
specifically asked by HCD on
Yeah.
this one to
Yeah.
look at it, so that's a little different. If you want to just launch into the conflict of interest, because I did listen, and then I could.
Yeah, well, let's finish the Luigi thing first.
Okay.
Let's not jump around too much. I mean, I guess what I would say about that is that we've been struggling for this for a while. This application's kind of been on the books for 6 months. Because of committee schedules and budget process, he couldn't go forward back in November, December. So that was no fault of the developers. But I have wanted some guidance and some help looking at this. And so that's what I'm looking to you all for. And council did direct it. And so I know it makes you uncomfortable, but it's where we are. So what I would propose, and I think you're right, you know, our brains are a little full. If there was a subset of this committee that'd be willing to meet, and I've done a lot of thinking about this and some writing of things. I didn't bring anything because it doesn't feel baked to bring to you yet, but I think there's some options of how this could be dealt with from a policy perspective. You could recommend that micro units under a certain square footage have another rent line, right? So we've got a 1-bedroom rent, efficiency rent. Maybe I've looked. Months ago, I scoured HUD for micro units. It doesn't really exist. They haven't caught up to that. So it's an efficiency. It meets the definition of an efficiency. We've gone through the voucher requirements. We've gone through everything that it does meet standards, like it does qualify. So should it be a lower rent than an efficiency because it's so small? I don't know. Should it get a percentage less of taxes back? Maybe. And also we could look at, and we talked a little bit about this before the meeting, and it may not be good science, but we could look at some existing micro unit projects like in other cities and I did look at the Nashville ones, and the rents were pretty low. The rents were fitting our 80% efficiency standard. And I don't think they have any affordability subsidy, because that's been the concern. Like, are we subsidizing something where they could charge those rents anyway? Right? So I think that's the main question for this policy. Like, how do we make sure that micro unit rents are truly affordable and that it's a correct use of city dollars? That's the question.
Right.
And there's a bunch of ways to slice and dice this, right? So I talked to the tax assessor for other things, but when I was talking to him, I just went ahead and asked, I was like, how would this be assessed? He's like, well, it actually might be assessed higher. It might have actually a higher per unit, per square foot rent, right? So, because you have so many rents, or you have 231 units on a half an acre of land. So you are going to have this income stream. They're looking at income when they assess. So the assessment actually might be pretty high compared to a standard suburban apartment complex. So it gets complicated. The math gets very complicated. And I would love a group of people to maybe meet once in a couple weeks, I don't know, and bring back some ideas to this full group, and we can talk about in April. I don't know if there's other, and there may be other things to consider. We could send out things to the whole committee and get comments back, not group email, but I don't know.
It just feels like there's, I mean, one of the main things we're talking about putting on our work plan is looking at Luigi standards, and like here, we're being asked to talk about one specific thing, and the reason why we're being asked to talk about one specific thing is because of a pending application. When I think it seems like that's where it feels uncomfortable to me.
I understand.
That it's sort of like, yes, I totally agree, especially hearing like to what the information we just heard now, I think is one of the biggest things of how we should try to adjust, like that we as a committee, policy committee, can take into our mind of like how we look at adjusting what we're asking from Luigi for, you know, or whatever policies based on how we provide more voucher or project-based or however we want to refer to it. But yeah,
Now,
On the
let's
flip
think-
side of that, though, is that we have a policy in place, and so if we don't comment on it, and the project gets approved, and we then meet 6 months from now and say, well, we didn't like that project, and we thought it was a bad use of taxpayer dollars and incentives, well, the cow's already left the barn, right? So I mean, here's our chance to give input, on an issue that's not clear cut.
Right.
And I just think we need to just, go ahead and deal with the uncomfortableness of it and make sure we comment now, because it's kind of now or forever hold your peace.
And I will say, I saw David Nash the day after HCD, and I mentioned it to him. He's like, that's perfect.
yeah, I think that's.
He was like, this is great. This is what we need. We need units with vouchers. If he's accepting all 20% of the units, he'll accept vouchers. That's what we need. So it was really interesting, and he made a very strong argument in terms of sustainability and density. Its location, it's right near the transit center. I mean, there's so many great things about it.
Yeah. And I heard
the
that.
question still remains, is it a good use of city dollars?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's what it all comes down to.
But I heard that same thing. That was David Nash's feedback. I'm like, why are why are we questioning this? Like, but I hear, yeah. I mean, maybe do we? I mean, I'm trying to think how we're going to do this. Do we want to?
Appoint an ad hoc subcommittee.
We don't need. I mean,
So to me, it sounds like, from what I've heard, there's kind of two questions around this. One is, what's the marketability, right? I've heard Margie articulate, we have a different population than Nashville or Seattle or some of the other places that have had success with micro units. And so one thought might be, as we look at Luigi and we look at this particular application, is it's not uncommon to require a developer to do a market study, in an application process, and that's something that we don't do as a typical part of Luigi. So, that would answer the question: is there, looking at both, affordable housing households who might be utilizing this for vouchers, or in another way, another affordable housing incentive program. And the other is just like, do we have that kind of young professional or aging in place kind of market enough to meet this? And then I think the other big question is the kind of subsidy per unit. Does it make sense to give a 200 and something square foot unit the same level of subsidy per unit as we would a 800 square foot apartment? So are there issues other than those two issues around this? Because I feel like we could.
I think
If we
the
could hone
second
in, we
issue,
Yeah, what's the appropriate subsidy?
the second is like the biggest to me, because I'm sorry, her voice is in my head, and I'm like, if the voucher is gonna be less because of the size of the unit, then we gotta consider all of that as we think about affordable, like this being 20% of it taking vouchers. You know what I mean? Like just all of the things, and so it's like,
Well, this is a market rate project, am I correct? So there's going to be, that's what I'm understanding, it's supposed to be
Yes.
market rate.
I think the question is, what's market rate for a micro unit?
But
That's the
again, you
unknown.
could find that through the market study.
Yeah. And I would be willing to bet that this developer has done a market study. They're very, very smart, and they've done it probably, but have they done one in Asheville? I'm sure that the other places they have built them, they've done them, but I would, maybe he has. I mean,
Did y'all, I mean, because I was in for the HCD meeting. I was at HCD for discussing for ours, I don't remember what, I was there for our stuff. And so I listened into the whole presentation from the developer on that. And so like one of the things, and I don't know if we don't really have that, like, so they asked us for their input, but like one of the things that was brought up was like that the funding amount is a scaled amount because it is what it appraised for small, it's based on tax appraisal, so if it's a smaller unit, that the tax appraised value will be less. But I just don't know if we have, like, there's so many questions, I think, of like, we would want to know those things to have a good discussion on this.
Yes.
Because we don't really get, it's always been told us, we don't review individual applications.
Right.
And we don't discuss, and we don't have the applicant here to discuss this, but essentially we're talking about a policy that is kind of revolving around a specific application.
Yeah.
And it was kind of passed us back from HCD, like, well, we don't feel, basically, they didn't feel comfortable voting on it, so they asked us to discuss a policy. I'm like, now you're basically kind of asking us to talk about a specific application.
We're gonna have to get over that.
Yeah, well, I can say no.
So are we saying that Asheville needs micro units, or should we have micro units? Would that help our population? Because just being in the grassroots, I'm just seeing that no one needs anything less than an efficiency. And right now, I see when I go into some of these homes, they're crowded. Even my home, my apartment, it's crowded because we have too much stuff and there's not enough closets and all that. I told you that, Barry. So like efficiency or even micro unit, is that something that we need in our community?
I think of college students. Like when I hear micro, I'm like, these college students, we got UNCA, we got the colleges around here that students are coming in. And that's what registers to me when I think of micro unit, because when I think family, I don't see that being efficient enough.
But it also, somebody pointed out to me, it also could be a senior who doesn't really want a full kitchen.
Yeah.
But they like the community. I mean, there are some social benefits.
Yeah, that is the communal unit.
I mean, there is, it's not,
And formerly homeless or people seeking homes.
sleeping on somebody's couch.
That's right.
And there's-
And that is their need. That is just the need.
and maybe if
Small
we put the cart before the horses will come, because if we build something like this and we have it available, maybe it will attract more the younger, upwardly mobile, or the younger career-oriented person that's trying to work at a bank, say, and they've got some money. They're not in the affordable category, but don't have a lot of money, and so maybe this would work for them.
At what price though?
We're really only talking about the affordable units.
I'm sorry?
I think we're really talking about the affordable units.
Well, but it is a market rate community, so I mean, there's no difference between the market rate units and they're all 200 square feet.
It's kind of it's a roommate alternative. There's tons of the employees downtown, the service industry, the hospitality, they can only afford to live here if they're living in apartments or rentals with 3 to 4 roommates. So this is basically an alternative. The rent's probably about the same. But maybe let's just, because we need to set a time on this, we're kind of all fuzzy, I'm uncomfortable, we've been talking about it, but maybe let's can we just do a roundtable? Tell me what you think of them. Because I think having a base, because your question, is this what we think the city needs as a tool for affordable housing? And just hear what we think, that way we know, should our next step be an ad hoc committee? Do we have consensus about that? Because here we keep talking about, we need more housing of all size, every size, big units, little units, and here we're saying, well, maybe we don't want to make these affordable, and it kind of is counter to this, we need everything, we need everybody to think innovative, so, not everybody, but, so maybe, could we just do that? I'm just curious for everyone, just tell me what you think about this.
But before before we do that, I was trying to figure out if this was actually, what this conversation even was. My office is working on this project, so if we're having a roundtable conversation, I'm going to refrain from commenting.
Yeah, and in terms of your, conflict of interest, so his company's working on it, her company bid on it.
Oh, that's 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'm friendly-ish with the developer, so it's like, we're like, what do we do?
Two of us can.
I mean, Sasha Rich, I did listen in before, because I thought
Yeah.
it was remote. So,
Yeah.
so the direct financial interest is when it really triggers an actual conflict of interest. And you're currently working a company, even though you're not the developer and you're doing your engineering work, I'd say probably yes. Knowing somebody, I'm interested in affordable housing, and so I've been talking to this guy for a while, that's not a conflict of interest. I always say, because I do advise a lot of boards, sometimes you're going to be uncomfortable. I advise Historic Resources Commission. A lot of those people, you're picked for these roles because you have some connection or involvement in affordable housing. You're likely going to know people out there. But I say to somebody on HRC, just because the neighbor across the street is has a proposal, that's not a reason for them to recuse themselves. Now, they might say, I'm the neighbor across the street, I just want everybody to know that, and ask the board, do you think that's a conflict? But basically then, you just have just as much duty to vote as you do, to recuse yourself when there's an actual conflict of interest. Because you don't want to just, I'm not comfortable about this, so I'm going to not vote. That's not a role of committee either. So the only one I hear here really would be Chris's. And, there's some other things I can say about appearance of conflict when you're ready to talk about that.
Does it make sense to have a roundtable if you all don't have all the data you need?
Yeah.
Right now, at this second?
Yeah, I would think if we want to comment on the specific project, then we need briefing on the specific project.
That's not what we're asking. I don't think that's what Barry was asking. What was your question?
Well, it feels like we're commenting on a specific project to make policy, so yes.
Well, they asked us for,
But if you just want to have a general comment on micro-housing.
Yeah, we're talking about micro-housing on the whole, what our personal views are individually, and I think it would be helpful to be brief, each individual to share your thoughts, we might learn something.
But see, I guess my I understand that we need to share thoughts, but I want to really understand it because it's a new thing here. So it's not something that, if you're not a developer or know about these units and other places, it's not something that I'm going to be familiar with to that extent to even make an informed statement or comment on the situation. So I would love more conversation around this unit and what is the timeline? I want to understand what kind of time crunch we're under to make these type of recommendations and be completely informed. I understand the project, but I'm just.
Maybe that would be helpful too, either comment on what your thoughts are, or if you have specific questions, and I can keep note, and what we could do, or you can even email them to me after the meeting. We can kind of compile a list of questions and then get as much information as we can and get it out to you all in the next week.
Can I start with a question on that? So I'm looking back at the way this is worded on the agenda, and it says Luigi policy and micro units. Policy recommendation for micro units in general to HCD. So are we, just to make sure, is the question, how should micro units be weighted within the Luigi policy?
Yes, that's the question.
I think if we just define what a micro unit is, we can all kind of weigh in on how that feels, right?
Yeah.
I agree, definitely, because it's a new concept to me too, or it was a month ago or 2 months ago when I first heard of it. So, and my views changed on it over the last couple of months too. So.
Does anyone have a picture of one? So I can see the inside to just see if it's more of an efficiency, because I've been in efficiencies in public housing and not really liked it. So I just want to know if going down small from an efficiency.
Well, I'd say, we have 10 minutes left. And I think we have a couple other things, and I think this is, I mean, this, I think, plays into this, you know, a couple of these other bigger questions we've had, and I think we need to, we basically, I think we need, for maybe, if it's gonna come back on the next agenda, then we need a little bit more background of this. So it sounds like we'll wanna know exactly, kind of look at what exactly one of these units look like, what is the proposal, what is the rough.
The tax grant back.
I think a little bit more information so we can have a discussion on it.
The
And that
tax
way-
grant back.
Yeah.
We should understand as it stands right now, what would the tax grant back be for grant back?
So and it sounds like it's not being voted, we have next meeting to discuss this, it's not being voted on by HED this month, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so let's just get some more information on this so we feel like we can have a more informed conversation about it. Okay.
Is there anybody, well, I'm just gonna ask, is there anybody who would like to talk to me or with me? Like after, I'll get all the information out,
Sure.
as much as I can. Is there anybody who'd like to talk through like some different policy options for you to consider that we could bring back?
Oh, I think that's
Sure.
important, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, yes. Okay, thanks. All right, so we have updates. So updates and reports, we provided everything kind of in writing. Did everyone read through kind of the updates that were provided? Anyone have any questions? Anything specific you want to point out, Sasha?
I don't think I do. I did, yeah, so I put all the updates in here, and I'm gonna try to just do this from now on. I know you used to do this. Paul D'Angelo used to give you like a 20-page tome. I'm not giving you any tomes. But I did put in here just to point out some links to City Council's retreat, if you wanted to watch that. We do have a missing middle update here that you can read through. They haven't started meeting yet. Scott Adams is your rep, and Emily's the alternate for that. We did have Housing Trust Fund deadline passed. We had 6 applications. It totals 5.7 million and 272 units in those applications. We're working super closely with the county for the applications where people ask for money from both, because we've had this situation where the county, well, we just don't know what the county's going to do, and then they look to us to fund the rest, or, you know, different awkward situations. So we're trying to take some of the awkwardness out. And we have 3 overlapping tax credit applications.
Sasha, can you go back to the missing middle, and can you
Sure.
just define all of the different acronyms that are listed
Oh,
there?
sure.
And
Yeah, I'm
each
sorry.
one of those groups also only have one
Yes,
representative?
yeah.
Okay.
So the list here is Historic Resources Commission, AIA is Architects, AARP, I think we all know who that is. Kayla, it's an Kayla alum, so Kayla is the City of Asheville Leadership Youth Academy, I think that's right. And they're really awesome students that we have a program for, and so it's actually somebody who's an alum of that program. So it's kind of getting at a younger person's perspective. LNC, Legacy Neighborhood Coalition, and that's Burton Street, Emma, South Side, I think, is joining, East End Valley Street, Shiloh, thank you. AHAC, you all, SACE, Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment, which is another city board, Planning and Zoning Commission, CAN, Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods, which is a private nonprofit, and then NAC is a city council appointed commission, Neighborhood Advisory Committee. So the neighborhoods do have 3 kind of seats here. But for this thing to actually be successful, I think the neighborhoods have to be really involved. Otherwise, it won't happen. In the Chamber and Mountain True. Any other questions? And ADA is having an event, I see, well, it's not for a while yet, but they're bringing Opticos and they're giving a presentation to the community. So it's not a city-sponsored event, but it's kind of almost like a kickoff presentation in a way to educate folks about what missing middle is. Build and Connect is there. What else? I will say, and there's some CDBG and home thing, updates here, that process, that's why Nikki had to leave to go to a meeting. And I put some links here to the city council retreat items. I am working on an RFP for this affordable housing plan. I was hoping to have it for you today, and I've got 4 folks who generously volunteered to look at it, so I still need to get them a draft. My hope is to get it out for you all for comment. I don't think we can necessarily, I don't know that I have time to do a full vote here. I need to get it out before the end of the month, if at all possible. I'm trying to get it contracted before the end of the budget year, so.
Can I ask you a question? On the Housing Trust Fund, you came up with 5.7 million ask.
Yes.
Right? And the money that's in there is the $6 million that came from the bond.
Plus another 1 point something.
Okay, but the majority of it came from the bond money, which
Yes.
was for affordable housing.
Yes.
So the asks, are they affordable housing asks, or are they homeless?
Oh.
What is the?
It's all housing, it's all affordable housing.
All affordable housing asks,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. Any questions? Do you all want to talk to Janice really quickly about, or?
Sure. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Janice.
Okay.
So just for anybody who's listening on the phone, which I don't think, we're going back to the conflict of interest, or perception of conflict of interest.
As it relates to the new co-chair positions. And so being able to nominate, you're concerned that whoever would be nominated for co-chairs might more often than not have either a real or perceived conflict of interest that would make them not be able to participate? Is that
I guess
recapped
there's
what I
the question
heard?
of the legality and then the optics.
Okay.
And how does the city even look at that? Because that's like, it's different, like, it's different, because and this was a really good example, what you just did about this talk about the micro, like we were saying, well, that's very specific because this company's being engaged. Hers maybe is not as specific because they bid on it, and of course, as a regular builder,
couple of years
developer,
ago,
I bid on it. Me, because I have beer with the guy, doesn't mean that I'm ineligible, but it's good to know, because there's the difference between the legal part and the optics part, and to make sure that the chair in particular can lead that way. And I used that as an example for years, like as being the chair. I've never, to make sure that I kept clear of this, I've never applied for city funding. And I purposely have not done that because I thought, well, I don't want any optics of it. So,
And my specific question around the leadership roles, and we'll just keep using this same example because it's so fresh in everybody's mind. Let's say Chris was the chair, and it wasn't a matter of recusing himself in a vote in this situation, but if it was like, oh man, we got to get this through HCD, so I'm going to make sure that HCD wants AHAC to weigh in on this before they can make a decision on this particular project. So I'm going to make sure it gets on this agenda for this week, for this month's meeting versus the May's meeting, right? That doesn't happen. Like deciding what goes on the agenda and the timing and all of that sort of stuff is a decision that the chair of the committee is making, with the co-chair or with city staff, and it doesn't happen in a public meeting, but it definitely is one of those places where people could, the average outsider could look at this and say they're only bringing up topics that affect either this specific example, this person has a conflict or could have a conflict, or the only things that ever make the AHAC agenda are things that related to affordable housing development because a developer is the chair, right? So we're not looking at, how the Section 8 voucher program is administered, even though it's 3,000
Okay.
housing. Do you see what I'm saying? There's stuff that goes on behind the scenes that the leadership of the committee is involved in that affects what we discuss.
That's it, because it's even once removed, I would say, from a clear conflict of interest. I think that that would come up in the context of the overall committee calling the chair or the co-chair and saying, we're not following, we have a mission, we are supposed to look at policy, we're supposed to look at this. I don't even know how often you make recommendations on direct funding decisions. I didn't think you did. So if this body starts to feel like the chair is not going in the right direction, and I've seen some commissions where the members are not happy with how the chair is running it, then you will know it. And I think that everybody seems to be pretty strong, have strong opinions and be willing to participate, so I don't know that you'd have a situation. Sometimes you do have situations where the rest of the committee is pretty silent, and something like that could happen, and they're like, this person is just commandeering the whole agenda. So I don't know, I wouldn't want that kind of thinking to hamstring you from going ahead and making a decision. I know why you want to go down the route of the co-chair, because it sounds like when I went to your one meeting, I'm like, I think you're the most active chairs I've ever heard of. But if that's what you've defined as your role and the expectations of this committee, that's great. So I was really just going to try to focus on, I believe your rules of procedure have what is a conflict of interest under the statutes. I can read it again, but Sasha did a good job of saying it. And then when it's an appearance of a conflict, I think I heard somebody here. Let me just read the actual conflict, and this is from 160D 109. This is for planning commissions or governing bodies, making recommendations on planning-related matters. So, members of appointed boards shall not vote on any advisory matter where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member. And then it goes on, if you're doing a zoning decision, you also can't be a person who the member has a close familial, business, or other associational relationship, which having a beer with somebody I don't think would fall into that. But, so that's the standard, and that is the standard for, I think, every board and commission. Then when it comes to, and does anybody have questions about that direct?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, in your scenario, let's say, I mean, it almost sounds like you working for the organization that would be involved in it doesn't even do it. It's almost like you would have to get a bonus directly related to that project closing.
Well, you work for a nonprofit, but if it was, say, it was Andy's project, and again, I don't know how often you're advising on particular projects, and now I kind of understand why this became a concern, but if it got on the agenda, I would hope the rest of the body would say, why do you keep putting your own projects on the agenda? But even if they did, you wouldn't be able to vote on it because you're involved in that particular project. And somebody could say, or even Chris is the engineer, but his firm will make money working on a project, so that's proper to recuse himself.
I think what the concern was around perception was mainly because, like, we have some great developers on this. And so, and they might want, if they were to become co-chairs or chair, and we're voting on policy, because I know we've seen project lists, but we haven't seen actual projects and voted on projects. And so, but we do vote on the policies, and we do advise around the policies that impact the projects that someone could actually be
In the future, you could.
in the future, or something that could give someone a leg up in the perceived, even though that might not be the case at the moment, just the perception that, oh, well, this project could benefit from it, or housing could benefit from that policy, or Mount House, or whatever, you know what I mean? And so we represent different agencies in different respects, so it's how does that perception, it might not be an actual conflict, because it's not directly impacting a project or putting money into our pockets, but the perception that we're voting on policies that do positively.
I think that's just the struggle of being on the commission. And when it starts to feel that fuzzy kind of like, this might be perceived as, I don't think it's a real conflict, you can always, any commission member can contact Sasha and say, can you run this by legal? And usually the way it's handled, and somebody here said it, is that somebody's like, I'm not comfortable with this, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to say, I used to work for this company that's now proposing micro units. But I feel I could still make a fair and impartial decision. In fact, I think I know something about micro unit development now that would help this commission. And then if somebody onto the commission, so you're divulging that, you're disclosing that. Then the commission can always say, no, that is a conflict. And you vote and say, sorry, we think you should recuse yourself. Or that's when you get the person in the public hearing standing up saying, what? Don't do that. So I think some of what your concern is, what I'm hearing is further on down the line, is somebody learned something from being on this commission, which is a public commission, that somehow later on they were able to benefit from. But that's a policy decision. The other thing, I advise the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission and their questions around conflict. Those members are picked because they own property in that River Arts District. And so anybody could say, when they were talking about doing form-based zoning, somebody could say, well, you're just voting that way because you own it down there and you want it zoned that way, but it's like, but you're also on the body because you had that interest and you have that sort of, maybe somebody might view it as insider something, but you have that, they were picked so that they had some knowledge about that, just like you're all picked because you have knowledge about affordable housing. So if that helps you at all, I've been here 12 years and I advise Planning Zoning Commission every month, I'm there. Historic Resources Commission every month, that's quasi-judicial, it's a higher conflict of interest standard, even higher. Other commissions from time to time if you have conflict of interest. And most times when somebody calls and says, it's not an actual, but I'm not comfortable with it, I'll say, I would just divulge that. I would just disclose it and see what the rest of your body says. Because again, with that in mind, you have a duty to vote on things that might be uncomfortable too.
And just to reiterate, but you are, again, that you're advisory. So you're never the final stop for any of these policy decisions. It's really council's policy. And so that's one thing.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing, Andy, I don't know if you just may have a discomfort because you're an executive director of a nonprofit that does receive city funding. And I don't know if that's it or not. And I guess that would be a question to you, is that's not raised any red flags?
Unless you were voting on a specific, on Habitat's project that came before you and, should we be voting on this? There's going to be policy. You've often, HCD's often heard from Habitat, MHO, and Homeward Bound with input on what you're experiencing out there. We need down payment assistance, different policies that can only come from the people that are doing the work. So, but I think it's coming down to that final vote. Sometimes even having a discussion, really, if it's policy, not a particular project, it would be okay to, in some cases for Chris to say, I worked on a micro-housing project and these are in the past, it's the difficulties in these particular projects, because they're got to be high-rise, right? So more expensive in some ways, even though they're littler units. So does that help?
Can I make a recommendation to, yeah, because I gotta go.
I'm sorry.
Can we do this, so we've got, and part of it, I think, is how we've designed our little task forces, we tried to define what are the two main driving interests. There's building, there's how to connect, and then there's kind of the policy, and then there's the driving for development. And that's why we've kind of separated with that, and we've aligned with different interests. And now that we've created this co-chair opportunity, you have the opportunity for your co-chairs to keep each other in check with that, to make sure the balance is correct. How about, I mean, here's what my recommendation would be, is like, because we can't vote on, it's like we're time, but maybe why don't each task force nominate who they think would be, like from Bill, like nominate, this would be who we think for the bill would be, you connect, get together, recommend, and then we vote, none of it's binding, but then we can vote on, like, these are who we've collectively kind of nominated, because that way you're representing the different kind of two different interests that we as a committee has already kind of identified.
Yeah, that's good.
Say that again?
Basically, because of it's in some ways like
Right,
these.
build and connect.
Yeah, like we've kind of already, we tried to create these task forces to identify the two driving forces for affordable housing. There's we need more units. There's people who are focused on creating more units, and then there's people who are focused on how to work on some of the things of how to make sure the units get to the right people. How do we know who these people are to get to the, to try to bring them together. And now we've said we're going to do co-chairs, so that allows it allows the chair collectively to have a balanced viewpoint. And so maybe what we look at is the nominations, like, who might come out of this, like, to come from, you guys get together and say, hey, we think this or this should be, and the bill gets together, we think this should be.
Yeah, it makes sense for each co-chair.
Yeah.
I would just say that not everybody on this committee is on a task force, and so I would just want to, like, the entire committee membership should be, I mean, I thought we had a process with people telling Brian if they were interested, but I would like if you do that, I would just like those task force to consider every member, not just whether or not they're.
I think everybody was assigned, not everyone has participated in them, but I think everybody was assigned to a task force.
And I was going to ask real quick, on the structure, did you vote to have a vice chair or not? Because that's,
They left it as an option, but.
You left it as an option.
Yeah.
Because I always thought if somebody did have to recuse themselves as a chair, then you've got, because I have some bodies that have vice chair, chair, second, third vice chairs. So it's up to you, I guess, how you're going to structure that. But if you leave it as an option in your rules of procedure, but then each time you have to decide whether you're going to be voting on it. So I didn't know it was a nominating.
Okay. Cool. We have any public comment that's come in?
I had somebody email me saying that they sent in public comment, but I did not see it. So I will go back and try to find it, and I will send it to you all when I find it.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you, everybody.
So was there a decision there about committees, task forces? Because I'm not.
The committees will meet and then we'll have like this bill. Yeah,
That's aside from,
Yeah.
yeah.
Brian, we'll contact you.
Yeah.